can go ahead. Thank you. Welcome everyone to the African Women in GIS session being hosted by the Southern Africa Zone. It's titled, Navigating the Academic Writing Process. So we'll start off by presenting about the African Women in GIS community. My name is Letwin Pondo. I am the Southern Africa Zonal Coordinator for African Women in GIS. The moderator for this session is Nettey Madhinga. So she'll be coming in and back, unfortunately, because of network challenges, but she'll be here with us. So about African Women in GIS, I will present about our story, our mission, and our goals. So who are we as African Women in GIS? We are a community made up of African women around the world who work or study or are enthusiastic about the geospatial industry and its related field. So the community aims to allow its members to be themselves, to create networks, to gain mentors, to get career advice, partake in geo projects, improve their portfolios, access job opportunities, as well as geo course information, and showcase their works to the world. So I will also talk about our mission and vision. So our mission is to create a safe space for African women in the geospatial industry, irrespective of their career level. And our vision is to bridge the gender gap in the African geospatial industry. So someone might be wondering, looking at our colors and wondering what they really mean. So here is a breakdown of what the colors on our logo represent. So the leafy green, it represents our love for nature or geo. The pitch black, it represents unity and support among members. The light gray represents gender equality. And the pure white represents safety and safe space. So this is what our colors from our logo represent. So we just ran down through the history of African women in GIS. So what happened was in 2017, Chethna created a community. He called it Women in GIS from Nigeria. And then in 2019, Sahana Williams also created a community for women in GIS from Ghana. So then in 2019, Chethna and Sahana met on LinkedIn. They discussed their reasons for creating their respective platforms for women in their individual countries. So after then, that was when African Women in GIS came about in October of 2019. So from in the inception, the community had 41 Nigerian members, 11 Ghanaian members, and 1 member from Burkina Faso. So with time, you'd find that the community is also growing and expanding to different countries and communities around the world. So right now we're talking about having 500 plus members from 30 plus countries. And as calculated as of May 2022, most of our members are coming from Nigeria, from Kenya, from Ghana, Egypt, South Africa, and many of the countries shown on the slides. So now, due to the growth, the 2 founders could not handle the pressure for the growing community. So we now have about 28 volunteers who help run the organization. And one of them is me speaking to you. We also have Dr. Noha and Safi here. So with time, we are having like 30 plus countries represented by African Women in GIS with 500 plus members and 9,000 plus social media platforms. So if you want to follow us on social media platforms, I think Dr. Noah is putting the links in the chat. You can also check that in the chat and follow us on our different social media accounts. So this map shows basically some of the locations of our members that we have in African Women in GIS. So it's actually a growing community, and it has like mostly representative from each and every part of Africa and even outside Africa. So we just look at problems that influenced our existence. So the first one will be a male-dominated geo industry. The second, lack of female role models in career guidance. Inaccessible GIS inaccessible GIS jobs information, inaccessible and unaffordable GIS events and courses, lack of GIS potential awareness, and lack of grassroots awareness. So these are some of the things that influence the existence of African women in GIS. So the fundamental problems are African GIS industry and other STEM fields are predominated by men, and there is lack of proper career guidance, coupled with inadequate school curriculum, then lack of exposure to African female GIS role models, lack of grassroots GIS benefits and application awareness among students, as well as the public, then gender career tenacity of some African parents. We also look at career path problems. We're looking at limited number of GIS-related jobs in African countries, inaccessible GIS jobs information, lack of female GIS mentors for career guidance, inaccessible or unaffordable GIS events and skills upgrade courses, and lack of knowledge of community membership. So now the question is, how are we contributing to solving these challenges? So what we are doing as a community is we are creating a platform for networking, for learning, for mentorship, and also for awareness. So by this, we're actually solving the problem that we mentioned earlier. So we will look at some of the community activities that have been done in the past. We are engaged in webinars and different kinds of events. So what happens is our membership for African Women in GIS is strictly for women, but events and other sessions like this, they're open to everyone. They're actually open to everyone. So these are some of the events that we carried out that are being shown on the screen.
Hello, Letwin.
Hi, you can move the slides. Yeah, so in summary, our community has created a platform which is a source of motivation for African women to take up career paths in GIS. So the aim is to expand in the coming years to support more African women in the GIS industry, introduce the younger generations to GIS careers, and help Africa benefit from the applications of GIS and its related fields, as well as fundamentally bridging the gender gap in the African geospatial industry. So we are open to fellow African women in Africa or the diaspora who wish to join our Slack and WhatsApp groups. So you follow us on our social media and also on our website. As geospatial, as African women in GIS, we say we view the geospatial world through the eyes of an African woman. So thank you. So let me see if Nettey is here. Okay, thank you. So from here, we are going to give this time to our speaker. I'll introduce the speaker for us. So our speaker for today, for this session, is called Chethna Ben. She's a doctorate research student with the University of Melbourne, 2023. She has a diverse set of passions and considers herself a lifelong learner, beginning only now. Her interests include studies in systems, processes, land tenure, and sustainability. So now I will just give this time to Chethna for her to walk us through the session. Chethna, you're welcome, and you can have the floor.
Hello and good morning. I hope everyone is able to hear me. I'll just get a thumbs up if you are, just so that we can make this a session about interactions. Great. Thank you so much for coming in. It's such a privilege, and congratulations to Letwin and the team for the African Women in GIS. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And again, I'm just going to ask you to please give me a thumbs up if you're able to see my screen now. Perfect. Thank you so much. So as you know, my name is Chethna Ben. I was previously based in Fiji. That's where I've been born. And now I was given the scholarship to undertake PhD here at the University of Melbourne. And it's such a privilege to be able to speak to women and men alike about writing documentations or academic writing, which I feel is a dreaded concept. Now, before I start, I would like to acknowledge the land on which I stand and also the land that you are joining us from. And also a caveat, often when we talk about knowledge creation or academic writing, we see it as a jargon of information literacy. We also think about knowledge creation or management, and all of this requires us to report and write. And there's a flood of information in the library and online regarding this. And one of the caveats I want to do is I do not consider myself an expert in this area, because there have been few mentors and resources that have helped me craft my writing better. And that's the beauty about writing academically, is you don't have to feel overburdened in getting it right in the first instance. And when you consider yourself as a learner, as I do, I say that I'm always learning, because there's always something new that I find out. So when we start considering ourselves in that platform, and I can release myself of that burden, I know that many of you would have a very resourceful guide that you would like to input in this. So I would like to make this session more collaborative so that we can enjoy it. We can make it more peer-led. We can make it collaborative, creative, and a critical session to enjoy the art of writing. So for today's outline, what I would like to notice is there is no right way to approach writing, but there are many approaches which are demonstrated to work well. And today, what I would like to shed upon is identify the different types of knowledge that we have, undertake the conceptualizing activity, and find strategies to write productively. We also want to develop our written expression. And I feel everyone has an expression of the way that they write. But the thing that comes in between our expressions to write is our imposter syndrome, where we feel we are not good enough because suddenly we've been put into a field that's talking about writing academically. And we always question ourselves in thinking, have we got this right? Are we doing this in the right way? I've had this imposter syndrome a lot, and it's easy for us to feel as if we are pretending to be something that we are not, or people will find out that we are not an expert in a topic. And the way to overcome imposter syndrome will be briefly discussed in today's session based on some of the learnings that we were exposed to here at the University of Melbourne. So the first thing I would like us to do is if you could kindly join me on Mendeley. If you have not previously used Mendeley, then these are the instructions. You can go to www.menti.com and enter this code 82907968. Yeah, I'll wait for everyone to hop onto this menti.com. And while I'm waiting on this, I see Emma's a very interesting question. I can understand what you mean over there, and I did read that you're also a PhD candidate. The balance between academic language to be accessible is understanding your readers. And we'll touch a little bit on that later on, and understanding yourself as the writer. So it's all about, do you know who you're writing for, why you're writing, and where you're writing? And we'll touch that in today's session. But if everyone is in Menti, I would like to kindly ask this first question. And the first question is, why are you undertaking academic writing? So there's a word cloud that would appear. You can put words, and I just want to know who I'm speaking to today, so who my audience are. I'd like to learn from you. Why are you undertaking academic writing? Okay, so if you have not yet joined Menti.com, I would kindly request you again to go to www.menti.com. I can place that on the link here. And the code for these questions to be answered is on your screen, but I can place it down over here as well. It's 282907-968. Why are you undertaking academic writing? Explain a concept, fill gap knowledge, to get more insight, to increase knowledge. You are a college student, okay, that's good. Considering a different career, great. You are an academic, a professional, and it requires you to do academic writing. So I can see a lot of you are students. Some of you, I feel, are in the undergraduate, if I'm correct, and some of you appear to be in the more postgraduate level. Satisfaction, that's very beautiful. Scientific communication. Nice. Okay, we'll just wait for more people to answer this. Globalization as an aspect of academic writing, that's very interesting. Find solutions. Okay. Thank you so much for your answers for today's session. Now, when we talk about writing in general, we start off with a topic. We start off with something that is of interest to us. It could be land. It could be a versional land. It can be based on tribes. And as GIS people would often want to look at patterns or spatial patterns. And the topics are diverse. One of the things we need to understand is the research process in taking that big, broad, clunky topic and making it something that we can write about. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to define the topic. When I started off my PhD, I am still in the process of defining my topic. And the way that you do this is you read about what other people have talked about in this area. And when you start doing that, you suddenly realize that the topic itself, instead of getting narrower, actually gets broader for you. So when you're starting to define the topic and narrowing the topic, what you want to first look into is who you are as a writer and why you are doing this topic and what are you interested to find out. So the first thing we need to do is find out relevancy of your topic. When you're researching, you always want to consider relevancy. How useful is this information to you in terms of what you're hoping to find out? Your goal is to find information that is directly related to the questions you are seeking to answer. And this is important when you're researching for personal reasons, of course, but when you're researching for professional or academic reasons. Sharing information is not directly related to your content, and it may cause others to question your credibility. So that takes us to the second question. You want to find a topic that is credible. So when evaluating a source, you need a way to check the credibility of the author that you are reading. If the source has no author at all, then this should give you a red flag. The most credible sources will not only provide an author, but will provide a link of some kind of information to allow you to read more about the author's background and credentials. Of course, you can always look up an author on your own, and you should. But if a site does not provide this information for you, you can always go ahead and check that. But a site needs to be transparent to give you this information as well. So what I'm trying to get at in this conversation around topics and narrowing your topic is identifying where this information is coming from and seeing whether that information is relevant and whether it's from a credible source for you to be able to take a topic and narrow it down. And that takes us to the third step, which is gathering background information and creating a research question. Now, with academic writing, even if you are an undergraduate student and your lecturer gives you an assignment and they say, let's talk about climate change and how it has been impacting smallholder agricultural farmers, let's say. What you see in that is an opportunity to read what your lecturer is talking about, a research question. Now, if you are a postgraduate student, the research question will not be very clear, and you will need to make assumptions. Is this a problem and solution type of a question? Is this a comparison question? Is this an exploratory description type question? When you make those judgments about what type of question you are looking at, then you're able to gather and start working on your thesis statement and evaluating and finding sources. And the main thing over here, which is step 7, is whenever you're gathering this information, you must keep it into a database that you can go ahead and reference where you got that information from. And part of the academic writing process is giving relevancy and credibility to your work as well while you're citing other people. So it takes us to the third element or third key part, which is to maintain accuracy. So a site that gives you an opportunity to easily check the accuracy of the information it is sharing is going to be more credible than the ones that do not. Now, when it comes to academic writing, you also want to see whether the authors who have talked about this subject have provided accurate measures of looking at a problem. So as spatial students, when we are looking at, for example, the soil type of a particular area, we know that we will be using soils data to look at soil type. We won't be looking at rainfall data. Or there would be an element of rainfall data if you're looking at other questions like, how observant is the soil? But to specifically look at soil type, we'll look at soil data. In that same instance, when we are reading work or reading literature, we need to be able to look at the authors and see how did they come to the conclusion that they did. Are they making general assumptions, which is a red flag again? You want to avoid these types of authors because they have not provided clear evidence of how they got to the solution or conclusion that they're making. So they need to provide accuracy. The fourth element about being a writer is understanding the purpose and the bias that each one of us holds in our academic writing processes. Even as a student, you will have biases that you do not previously know that you had. So for example, you're very passionate about climate change, and you're really passionate about bringing about solutions to vulnerable communities, as I am. But I do have a bias in myself. When I say I have a bias, I identify, one, I'm a female. So if I'm going to look at literature, I may have a more feminist approach, which may impact in the way that I'm writing. I am looking at my home country, Fiji, for my research. And because my ancestral link is different from the indigenous communities, I am identifying with the biases that I might have there as well when I'm talking about different communities. Now, the reason the purpose and bias is very important is we want to align our purpose so that we become a researcher that goes in this field of writing with an open mind to learn. We want to learn the positives and negatives of the research question that we have before us. And if my biases are stopping me to look at both angles, I have to alert myself and have triggers available to say, am I going in this one direction more because I have a personal bias to it? I have a cognitive experience. Now, when I say cognitive experience, what I mean is all of us have been growing up differently in different situations. And this has modeled the way that we think. It can be both an advantage to us as well as a disadvantage. The advantage is we are able to take on our core values and be passionate about a topic, to write about it and make an influence in a way that no one else would make. The disadvantage, however, sometimes can be that we forget to look at the other side, or the critical aspects to our own work. So that is why it's so important for us that we need to understand ourselves first before we start going ahead and reading other authors. Because before we identify our own biases, we need to be able to also read the other authors' work and be able to critique. Now, I know that you must have been hearing this term a lot about critics, and we often think that, it has often been perceived that critic is negative, but critic is also looking at a particular problem and thinking, well, what if this scenario had changed? Would what this author is talking about remain the same? And it's not about being critic immediately in your writing process, but being critical in your thinking process first. And then the last thing that you need to consider is your writing style. So when evaluating any literature, you want to consider the writing style. Is this literature free of spelling, punctuation, and grammar errors? Is my writing free of spelling, punctuation, and grammar errors? And if you find that the author is has a lot of punctuation errors, you know that's a red flag. But you also want to be aware of the tone of voice that the author is using when they're writing. Now, it may feel like it's difficult at the first glance to perceive the tone of the voice used by the author. But when I'm saying tone, what you can look for is the way, in the methods that this author is going to craft their question or answer their question. Is the author trying to give a professional critique to a work? Are they doing a problem and solution again? Are they comparing two things? Are they being assertive about something? Are they using an activist tone where they want to make a change? Are they being more neutral? So these are the things that you want to be able to assess. And if you're reading an article, then you need to be able to also look at how you're feeling when you're reading the work. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to stop there for a little while and see if you have any questions from what I've just talked about. And I'll just wait on the chat now. Do you have any questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, I'd appreciate a thumbs up just so that I know that you are flowing through or following through what I'm discussing. Good. Okay. Thank you. Please feel free to enter into the chat box any questions that you might have. Now, so where to start? I've talked about topic selection. I've talked about where you can gather all of this knowledge. But the main thing is, where do you start if you want to select a topic? Now, to be able to do this, I do have a question for you. When you plan your writing, what is your approach to planning? Now, some people like to be exhaustive and they use lots of amount to plan before they start writing, while other people are more flexible. So, ideas just come to them and they discover while they write. No approach is entirely correct, but each has its advantages and disadvantages. And don't forget, your preferences are not written in stone, but reveal what most naturally comes to you. And you can and will make modifications to your style of planning. So I'm going to put this into the chat, and I would like to learn what is your approach to writing. So if you can open the chat box. The first is, I can only start writing when an idea inspires me. So it is sometimes hard to plan what I write. If you don't know, you have not written anything yet. Before you write, you complete a detailed plan of everything that will go into the section or chapter and then follow it like a blueprint. So writing for you is turning out your dirt points into full sentences. For others, it would be you start to write to think and it just comes naturally, so you don't plan much. And for others, it could be you plan a fair bit, but you like to be flexible in case you change your mind, and then you revise plans as you go. So from these, I'm sorry, there was not a multiple choice question. I just realized my Menti was limited in what it could offer me to ask you questions. So I thought this would be a nice way for us to talk about your strategy. How do you write? Or how do you plan to write? Are you someone who goes with the ideas that inspires you? Do you just start by writing first and then plan later? Or are you someone who's more detailed oriented? And it's okay if you haven't written anything yet. That's good, Jasmine. Thank you. Yeah. That's a nice analogy. I think this is a really nice reflective opportunity as well. Yeah. Thanks, Emma. That's good. So I got a direct message from Sheila, and she's saying, I can start writing when I get inspired by what I observe in my surrounding. This leads me to organized chaos, which sometimes gets overwhelming. I can understand. I have been down that route too. Yeah. So there's no right approach. I have many approaches that I write. Sometimes I'll sit down and I'm inspired by an idea and I'll just keep writing it. And then I realize that, oh, wait, it doesn't fit into my topic. Other times I'll have like a strict blueprint and I'll just write it. And then I realize, oh, I missed lots of information. So what I'm trying to get at is there's no right way. It's actually a combination of all of them coming together and it should suit you as the writer. You should know who you are and how you work best. And this will help you look at your weaknesses and your strengths. And this is not something that I can tell you, but I can help you see what type of writer you are when you get the ideas so that you can use it to your advantage. I'm going to ask the second question. And this is about the use of time. So if you can see the chat, I've written, how do you use your time writing? Do you prefer long binges, or do you like to organize short writing sessions, which is like snack writing with a clear outcome? So what this basically is asking is, do you like to have blocks of time, like 2 hours, 3 hours, or a whole day writing? Or would you prefer to have like short time, like 15 minutes in a day or 20 minutes in a day, every day to finish off your writing? So you believe that tasks can be done in spare time here and there, and that other times can be used for reflection. You don't have a writing routine yet, which is okay. It takes a while for you to get going, but once you're in, yep. So the last option for D, great. You're good at ticking off sections as they're written. I'm the same. I usually, after I've got out of my flexible mode of writing and inspirations, I like also having sections in. And then once I've written those sections, I feel I've achieved something. That's good. C, yep. I should be putting ABC, thank you. Yeah, easy sections. Yeah. So I think a lot of us are good with writing. Thank you, Dr. Noah. Yeah. So I think what we have is the way that you and us, we personally use our times, understanding who we are as a person with the use of times and making the best use of our day then. If we work better in long hauls, then we need to understand, we need to put that into our diary. But if you prefer the shorter bases, then you're someone who would use that in your diary and saying, okay, the most productive time of my day is 8 a.m. So I'll wake up at 8 a.m. I will have no contacts with my phone or emails, and I'll just get into that 1 hour session when I'm productive and being able to write. I'm going to ask the final question, which is, what is your writing style? And again, you can do A, B, and C over here. So which of the following most reflects to your approach to write? I need to find exact words and expressions as I write. Otherwise, I feel I have not examined my ideas fully. Or I write to get the ideas down. Sometimes my expression is far from perfect, but I can tidy it up later. Or I have never really thought about how I write. So what this basically is asking is, yeah, I do have the problem of A as well. When I first started writing, I felt like I had to get it perfect the first instance before I could go any further. Yeah. Again, there's no right or wrong way of approaching this, but it is helpful to see how you are as an author, but also trying to see a little bit of a bias there as well. And when I'm saying a little bit of a bias, it's understanding that it's okay to sometimes not get it right in the first instance. But if you become overly inflexible about getting it right, chances are we may sometimes forget to write it all. But on the other hand, if we are someone who goes with the flows, and we just write, then there might be a tendency for us to not go back and edit the work or proofread the work. So we need to have a balance between how we write, how we approach our time, how we approach our writing style as well. And I feel like these are perhaps some useful tips that we could use when you're writing. And one of them is you must be clear on why, what, when, where, and how you write. And other times, what you're inspired by. Avoid plagiarizing. You will get this a lot in academic writing. Even young authors have a level of originality in their thoughts, and it's about developing that. So understanding that if you don't want your ideas to be stolen or projected in a way by other people that is not representative of who you are, then it's important for us to source the people that we are citing as well. So avoiding plagiarizing is looking at, what if that was you? What if your ideas were stolen and you wanted to make an impact? So if you don't want that happening to you, we want to avoid doing it to others. Reading is going to be something that you will constantly hear a lot of people say, but it perhaps isn't something that everyone is comfortable with. So it's about getting into that routine of saying, I want to start reading. And that's where all of this topic definition starts to come about, is defining who you are. So be ready to challenge the straitjacket syndrome. Often when we read literature, we put on our jackets in a straight way and we start, walking like a penguin, because we've taken someone else's idea and we've thought that because they're an expert in the field, they know better. And we don't stop to critique the work and say, okay, this is what the other author has said, but what does it mean for me? And again, this is about also navigating your researcher bias that you have and saying, what does this mean for me and the community that I'm researching about? But at the same time, having that open mind and saying, well, this author has said this, but on the other hand, the other author has said this. So there could be some other gray area that hasn't been explored yet. Create your environment and space. I like to have a closed space when I'm writing. So I often close the door, make sure I'm undistracted. I also like having a headphone, which has some rain or thunderstorm sounds while I'm writing. So that's my space of writing. You also need to identify what makes you most productive. Are you someone who gets easily distracted? If you are, then perhaps having that environment and space to shut up and write could be interesting. Determine when you will write, which day you are most productive in. So I got this advice from my PhD supervisor, and he shared his journey. He would wake up early morning at 4 a.m. and he would spend 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. just writing. He would not do anything else. He wouldn't read. He would just write. And then at 6 a.m. to 7, he would go out for a walk. And then he'll spend the whole day reading, conversing with people, talking to other people, getting ready for the next day on what he needs to read. So he was observing himself in reading and reading. And then as soon as the day was about to end, he would put down some notes or points about things that he has read throughout the day, things he would like to look at the next day, or things he would like to reflect on. Then in the next morning, whatever he had read the previous day, he'll sit down and start writing on it. So that was an approach that worked for him. But we all are different, and we need to find approaches that work for us. Some people are night owls, so they like working or writing at the end. Other people like writing while they're reading. So trying to identify when you will write and prioritize your work. Creating a blueprint is helpful because that helps you to stay focused. It helps you to know whether you've achieved or answered the questions that you have. Otherwise it will become very messy and you could easily get distracted because there's a lot of literature out there and there's lots of good information that we would feel interested in talking about, reading about, but it may not be part of what you want to answer. It's also important to be flexible. So while you have a blueprint, and you might say, okay, I would like to start with an introduction about, so in my case, I'm looking at community resilience, and I would have a blueprint of looking at community resilience from redefining poverty to looking at how financial institutions are working, let's say. But in that element, I'm also flexible in my early stages of writing and saying, perhaps there's like social elements, because I'm looking at community resilience, I'm reading something and there's a social element that is important for my work. So I'm going to be flexible in seeing whether that can be incorporated into my work, whether it has a more interesting and higher value that I can put into the literature, into my work. And then get your work reviewed. Get it reviewed by people whom you can trust, who can read your work and be honest about what you've written. And one of the things about writing is it's an art. It's your expression. You are the dancer. You are the painter. You are the poet. Be what you like to express, but express it eloquently. Express it intentionally. Express it responsibly. But also be mindful about your readers. Who's going to read this work? So with this conversation around where do you start, what you're doing is you're going from a topic to a broad question. What is it about this topic? What is it about climate change that you would like to know? Getting more specific, is it a particular community? Is it a particular geographic area? And then going into your research question about who, what, and where. And working towards your hypothesis in that instance. I'm just switching between chat and Menti again. So if you could kindly go back to the Menti that we had earlier on. The question that I have for you now is, what is your academic topic? What are you researching on? Water management, precision agriculture. Hotspots. Good. Climate change and sea. Okay, level rise. Okay. Public transportation. Now, as we can see, these are quite big, broad topics, and we need to channel it in. And channeling it in is not something that we do just by sitting on our desk and thinking, oh, we can look at public transportation, and I can look at, why are trams working efficiently in Melbourne? These things need to come out from a source. They need to come from the literature. While there would be things you would like to talk about because of something that you have seen on the field, it's always important when you are redefining your topic or taking up your research question to go back and see where is the gap in the literature. Chances are, when you start writing, someone has already written about it. So this scoping exercise or this literature review exercise helps you to go to a question and write about something that has not been previously written. Even if you're an undergraduate student, when you're answering or writing about topics that has been given from your lecturers, you would want to not only summarize other literature's work, you want to be able to think about it deeply and say, well, if they've talked about public transportation being efficient with the use of trams, why are they not talking about walkability? That seems like a gap in all of the work that I've been reading. Or why have they not been talking about the influence of topography on people's ability to walk? So other elements and questions should be there when you're writing. So doesn't matter which level you are in. The main key thing is that your writing needs to be centered around what has already been said. And the best way to look at what has already been said, because there's going to be thousands of publications, and there'll be more people writing every day or paper published every week from different countries. The key for you in your topic is looking at the context, the geographical area that you're focusing in, and seeing who the top most cited authors are and reading them. Because once you get the grasp of what the most cited authors are talking about, it will give you an opportunity to look back and say, okay, these are the gaps now being carved in, and then going into that track as well. So understanding the knowledge that we are creating means that we go into the depth of recalling the knowledge that we have read from literature, going into the level 2, which is where we start to categorize after we've recalled that information or that knowledge. We start to use our categorization, cause and effect skills, and applying them to concepts and explaining how and why does this happen. So it's taking the knowledge that we've learned and asking ourselves, well, how does this compare to other literatures? Why has the author said this? Interpreting it, graphing it. And then it goes to the third level of thinking, which is strategic thinking. Then you find evidences for what you've been writing. Is what you're saying, is there evidence to what you're saying? Are you able to conclude what you're saying constructively? Are you able to critique even your own work? Are you able to build a logical argument? Are you able to differentiate? And then the last level is extended thinking. Are you able to apply concepts? Are you able to plan and think and make real world applications in new situations? So this is Webb's depth of knowledge. So after you've read any literature, this is something that I like doing. So I take one article that I read, I close that article, I think about what the author was trying to say, then I stop, and then I pen down, okay, what was this author doing? Was he comparing? Was he doing a problem and solution? So I do the text structure. Was he giving a chronology of events? And then I try and categorize each of the themes that they have been coming up with, and I can use concept maps for that. So if you do not know what a concept map is, I have provided a concept map in my my session today. So you can have a look, and then assessing, is there evidence to what the author has said? Does this provide evidence for the work that I'm writing, or do I need to find evidence from other sources? So this is where you're able to then take what you've learned from that one article and shift your thinking about what the other article could provide for you. Or even if it's not just literature, if this provides a gap for you to go ahead in the field, get data to research on, or use secondary data to draw upon your inspiration to talk about what has been previously said. And then you extend what you have found new, found from the literature, and apply it to the concept. I'll just pose again. Do you have any questions at this stage? Okay, please keep them coming if you do. I'm just going to also ask with a thumbs up or thumbs down. Am I making am I in what I'm saying clear? Are you able to? Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Thank you. So what is knowledge? And this is an interesting question because knowledge can be of many ways. And this is what I say when I'm talking about concept mapping or using tools like this. And I'm going to also provide a reading that may be very helpful for you. And this reading is from Theories and Models of Writing from Bresman. And you can always go ahead and read this work later on in your own time. But the purpose of knowledge creation is for us to be able to differentiate, the facts. What are we reading? We're trying to read facts about people. Where do we get this facts from? We get it from law. We get it from people's perceptions. We get it from the census data. We get it from organizations. We get facts to identify a problem. We also want to know the significance of why we're writing or what other people have talked about. And then we're also using our cognitive, which is our lived experiences or things that we have read, into our writing process. So remember that there could be two authors. One person, for example, has been reading a more positive approach to community resilience, while the other author might be more critical approach to community resilience. Because of the two streams of readings that these two authors have been doing, they would come in and write about an article based on their lived experiences and the things that they've been reading. So as a writer, you need to be also aware, I'm not going to only be a critical reader. I'll also look at what the positives or people that have supported this theory are talking about. And if you're someone who wants to support that theory, you also want to be talking about what are some of the negatives. And the best way to do that is then going into the roots of how this new knowledge was created. So if you're looking at, so I'm looking at resilience. I know that Hollings and Gunderson were the key people in my work. And from that Hollings and Gunderson, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, who are the people, who are other authors that have critiqued Hollings and Gunderson? And then I'm going to look at their critics. And then I'm going to look at who are the people who have actually supported their work and read there and see what the difference is. So again, it's understanding that we are looking at facts, we're looking at significance, and then we're also relying a lot on our lived experiences and the knowledge that we have gained from the people that we interact with, literature that we read, in helping us craft this writing. And it's also being aware of our biases and avoiding those biases. So it can seem daunting, but it's actually a fun way to get to know ourselves better and also make a wonderful impact. So in this case, what we're doing is we're also conceptualizing it. So we're using theories, we're using generalizations, we're organizing those facts into a meaningful way. We're talking about it explicitly or implicitly. And this is what happens when you start reading a lot of work. You start thinking at a deeper and critical level. And if you're able to explain it in a concept map, which is what works for me, I feel like I'm getting to understand what I'm writing. Or it can be a procedural thing of what into and how action can be criteria based, or it can be specific or subject specific. And knowledge in this instance is about understanding, is this something that happens qualitatively? Are other authors in this field talking about it qualitatively? I'm not sure if you're aware of the difference between qualitative and quantitative, but qualitative data is more about looking at lived experiences, perceptions, whereas quantitative data is more quasi-experimental, or experimental designs, and they look more for statistical information, but you could have qualitative and quantitative together as well to explain your information. So it's what I'm trying to get about knowledge creation is, when you look at a topic, you want to be able to look specifically, and there would be methods section there in how the author has structured their article. And that's the key. While we're looking for like the content and what the main themes are, sometimes we overlook the methodology part of it, because the methods will give a lot about how they've come to the conclusion that they have, and if there could be other ways of answering that same questions. And if there are other ways, then would it give the same result or would it give a different result? And while we're doing all of this, it's important, or it's common to have a writer block, and to be able to write, or to be able to eloquently write. What we have a problem to navigate is we need to be an effective reader and connect the dots. That makes it very then easy for us to be able to write effectively. So I'm just going to stop here and sum up some of the things that we've been talking about. Relevancy is important, credibility is important, the currency of information, when this was produced, is important, how accurate with the methods is this author's work is important. We need to understand who we are as an author, and the biases that we have, and the purpose of the article that we are reading, or the author that we are reading, and what the biases they have, and the writing style. And what you've been sensing in a lot of my first part of my conversation today is reading, and reading, more than just writing. So do you have any questions before before we move ahead? How do you write without going out of context? It's having a clear research question is important, and your research question needs to be specific. And we'll go over the SMART approach. If you haven't heard of the SMART approach, it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant, and it's timely. An academic paper is like a research paper, Mary, but it varies in the levels that you are in. So if you are an undergraduate student, you won't be necessarily expected to go on the field, apply for ethics, get data from the field. You may start off with literature review, so getting familiar with the work, but you will need to use your critical lens, trying to see the theory in both perspectives. So that's the positive and negative. And that's where your research skills are coming in. That's where your research is. But there's a bound, there's a limit to it. When you go into a postgraduate level, let's say a master's level, over here, you're not creating any new knowledge. What you're doing is seeing what other authors have done and trying to see whether this would be applicable to the new case study that you're trying to do, using the methods that other people have used, and trying to test a theory or find an answer to a problem. So that could be the two areas. And then, of course, the doctorate level is another one, which I'm still at, so I won't even comment on that, which is creating this new knowledge. And it's fascinating, but at the same time, very daunting. Yeah, so but it's like there's different levels of understanding where you are, but I do understand that today we have a mix of audiences. So, but the key over here, what I'm trying to say is you need to understand who you are as a writer, but who you're writing for. So if it's an assignment, you know that your reader is going to be your assessors or your lecturers and examiners. And you need to write in a way that explains to them clearly. But if you are writing an article for a journal, then your readers are going to be the readers for the journal that you are targeting. And you need to see who are most likely to read these types of journal articles. Are they more academic people? Are they consultants? Do policy advisors usually read this journal? And if it's going to be these people, then you have to use simple and plain language often as well, because academic writing can take two stances as well. So if your target audience is you want to reach or influence the government, then the government do not have time to read fancy, difficult reports. They want something that's very clear, straight to the point, and they don't want to talk about theories even, but your understanding of the theory can be important in talking about the practical circumstances. So remember, even in the field, I feel that you can draw upon your theories to answer certain questions. Do we have any questions? If you'd like to unmute yourself. Oh, okay. So, Letwin, is it okay if we just open up the breakout rooms? Oops. And what I would like us to do is think about the topics that you've been sharing earlier on and see what is the current pressing issue within your community that needs a researcher writer to communicate. So it's about narrowing the topic and trying to see, okay, what is it that's important in public transportation or climate change or sea level rise? What is a pressing issue? So while the topic is so broad, how will you define it? How will you redefine that into something that's answerable? That's a question that you have. And then once you've done that, there are some questions on the right-hand side of the screen that can help you see whether you've been able to define it. The first is you justify your measure of evidence that is actually a pressing issue, something that is a knowledge gap, something that is required. And then you formulate a research question based on the issue you've identified. And would you be interested to write about this? So it's again about your passion, about whether this is something that you want to invest in and write about. And this is just an example of something that I wrote, something that could help you as a guide. How do housewives in rural agriculture communities perceive the impacts of climate change? So that's something that I could easily go ahead and investigate through literature, through talking to these housewives in rural areas. But one of the things that's missing there is the geographic location of which agricultural communities I'm going to look at. So there's another element over there. You can narrow your topic by saying, okay, I'm going to look at housewives. I'm going to look at rural communities. They need to be agricultural based. I'm looking at the perceptions to impacts of climate change, but I can't be looking at the global scale. So I could narrow it down further and say, I want to look at it in the context of, let's say, Fiji, in the context of Australia, or the likes. So Letwin, would it be okay if you open up the breakout rooms for just maybe a 5-minute conversation about how you're going and how you would narrow down this question?
Hi, Chethna. So I'm not so familiar with breakout rooms. You can do that. I think you are one of the hosts. It's okay.
I don't see a breakout room option here either. That's okay, I guess. Yeah. I guess that's all right. Maybe I'll just give this as something for you to think about in your own time. Just think about a pressing issue within your community that needs research based on the topic that you're looking at. So looking at current affairs and seeing, is there evidence? Is what you're going to talk about or academically write about, will there be evidences to support it? Will you be able to have methods to answer that question? And then formulate a research question based on something that you've identified. And would you be interested to write about this? Sometimes when we look at questions, it's important for us to be interested in that as well. Otherwise, we might just fall out of writing on it. And the below is just an example. And I've noted that one of the things I can add over there is I can add the geographical context of where my writing is going to be. So you're more than happy to take a screenshot of this. So let's look at the core values, which is an important part about writing as academically. It's understanding what your core values are. I'm going to share this again. If I could kindly ask you to, so as I said, I had a very limited mentally so for this, www.menti.com, the code for this one is 4973. There's the link. (8434). What are your core values when you're writing? So they could be integrity, ethics. My core values of writing is social equity. I'm someone who's passionate about recognition and accountability. I'm someone who's passionate about inclusivity. What are your core values? Clarity, understanding. Checking high accuracy. Yeah. Now, while you're doing that, I'm going to also share in the chat another reading that may be helpful. It's an examination of the 4 theories and how they support writing in the classroom. I do understand that what I'm giving today is more of my perceptions, but these readings are very simple, they're very clear, which will give you some opportunity to reflect on your writing. Yeah, integrity. Yeah, okay, so you've got 2 integrity there. That's good. Contribution to knowledge, that's very important. We need to identify what our core values is when we're writing is. Do we have a voice in what we are saying? And we'll get to that because that's a very interesting one. And I'm glad you pointed out. Often when we look at academic writing, we think, oh, this is just another piece of paper that I'm writing and I need to get a knowledge about. But it's not. It's more than that. We're actually creating new knowledge for ourselves. We're contributing. We're adding to a conversation. It's like going into Instagram and talking about something that's popular, and we're adding a voice, adding a presence. But here we're adding it to something that's of value, something that other people will come back and look at. So that's really good. Thank you for sharing your answers. Yeah. This is really good. So the second thing we want to do is theories and models of writing. Now, I've given this reading earlier on from Ben 2015 on the theories and models of writing. We need to understand why and when people write. When we write, we're actually participating in social situations. In this instance, it's an academic environment. People write to address a certain situation. They write because a time requires them to write it. COVID-19 was a classic example of it. People started to write about the pandemic to learn lessons, to talk about better ways of improving it. It can be in context of pirate text. For example, a lot of authors, when they were talking about COVID-19, would go back to the Spanish flu just to look at the comparison and lessons learned and the differences that were available there. People write because of the influence of the situation, the form, and the production of texts. And what is the consequences of writing? As a writer, we often do not realize that we are actually building a relationship with the reader. So, for example, in this text that I gave, I want you to take a moment and read it and tell me about the emotions that you're feeling when you're reading this. Okay. Can someone place it on the chat? What emotion were you getting when you read that quoted text? A sudden bolt of lightning scattered the darkened and ominous sky. Rush of anxiety, right? See the impact that we have as writers? We do project some sort of emotions to it. People distressed in a disaster, that's good. So what do you think the author's purpose was here? Why would they use such language to write about this situation? What do you think are they leading to? Are they talking about a story? Are they wanting to alert people of something? Are they describing something? What do you think? Why would the author use a language like this? Talking about a situation of a sudden occurrence, which makes people panic. That's really good, Cynthia, and I agree with you. The writer over here was wanting to show how perhaps the community that they're working with wasn't unprepared for an emergency. While they would have megaphones, it seemed like there was something more than just rain coming in. It felt like there was a danger that needed to be addressed, a danger that perhaps needed people to immediately evacuate. It painted a picture. That's right. That's right, Melvina. That's absolutely right. That tells us of an urgency. But it's the art of writing that this author has used to be able to talk about something. So that's where you come in and understand why you're writing, who you're writing for, what you're aiming to get your readers. Are you aiming to, in an activist way, encourage them to take actions about something, or are you just comparing and contrasting? Because that's where your tone of writing will matter. So the consequences of writing are you build relations with your reader. Through participation, you have a voice and you identify within a forum. When you write in a journal or when you write for a university, you're actually creating a presence. You're entering into a space and a writing space, and you start talking to other authors in this space. Often when we think about writing, we think that we've written it in a paper, it's submitted, it will be somewhere in the file, or someone will come in and read it. But it's more than that. We're actually conversing with other writers and saying, this author has said this, but I feel because of the other evidences that exist and the research methods that I've used, this is what it actually produces, and I support the third author. What you're doing is you're creating a conversation. You're creating your own voice. You're creating your own presence. The voice is attributed by the readers, So you need the voice of an insider. While you have your voice when you're writing, you need to also step back and think, if I was reading this, how would I perceive this? What type of message is this giving? Am I being very aggressive? But my intention is not an aggressive tone. I need to be more neutral. And it's changing that. You're taking on not just the writer's voice, but the reader's voice. Your voice can be reflexive. So that's what it means. So you're categorizing your oneself and your commitments. Writing creates a shareable meaning. It's like sharing food, but in a wordy way. And it's a representation of the world. It has written meanings and knowledge that can have material consequences. So when we write, we just have to be mindful of the way that it's being projected. So how does writing gets done? It requires planning. You need refinement by engaging with literature. You need to understand the level that you're writing in or the genre that you're writing in. If it's an environmental sustainability journal, that's going to be a different genre. So you're going to start with what people in that field, how are they writing? If you are a land rights person, then you need to read articles or topics or journals that people are focused on there. If you're someone on climate change, that genre is different as well. And look at how authors have been writing. So you need to identify who your audience are. What form of text have they been writing? What form of text can you contribute over here? What material might be appropriately included? What may they accomplish? And they're also influenced by situations and often distributed amongst participants. So what this means is writing process are influenced by the research question and the situations that this research question is presenting. And then it is distributed among the participants that you are researching in this area. Writing is a development of skill. And like I said, I'm a learner as well. I often learn new things along the way. But it's easy for us, I know I have this, to move from one social domain to another. So when we are talking about two different concepts, and as in the field that we are in, especially with GIS, you could talk about land rights, and then climate change, which is another domain, can come in. So it's about navigating those two domains together and adjust our writing so that we are able to be clear on what is that intersection that we want to talk about, transform it into a knowledge, and look at what previous authors have talked about in cultivating our knowledge in a way that is important. Writing also gets done because someone has paid you to do it. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's part of your organization, maybe it's sponsored. So you need to understand how it gets done as well. It could be because a school requires it, an assignment requires it. So if it's an assignment, then again, your audience changes. Over here, you'll be looking at your marking criteria. It's always important to, whether it's a journal, whether it's sponsors, to look at what their terms of reference are. What is it that they want you to write? What are they looking at the end of your writing? What is it that they're looking at the end of your project to be able to write effectively in that way? And then learning to write outside of school often requires new learning as well. So it's understanding that your academic writing that you've been doing and your undergraduate and postgraduate level require a different style of writing. But then when you're going into a more professional workplace, that will be a different type of writing as well. So I did talk about this earlier, and I said you need to have SMART goals. And over here, what we want is specific goals. So for example, this is a very funny way of looking at it. Let's say you want to lose 27 pounds. That's a specific goal. And something that's measurable. So you can measure your goal by saying, okay, losing 27 pounds is measurable, as you can weigh yourself to check progress. It needs to be achievable. So you set goals that are achievable. Losing 100 pounds in 2 weeks is not an achievable goal. Is it relevant? So make your objective relevant. If your objective is to lose weight, then making it a goal to read a book wouldn't be relevant. You might need to do exercises, go on diet. So doing that cross-check of the SMART approach in your literature, in your academic writing is also important. You need to be specific. What is it that you want to measure? Which country are you looking at? It going into the details and saying, is this then measurable given the time that I've been given? Is this relevant? Is this something that's going to inform what I'm writing? You can't be writing about climate change and reading books from medical science, for example, or making references to medical science if they're not connected. You could do the influences, but that's another topic altogether. And is it timely? And then finally, you want to record your SMART goals. What is it specifically that you're doing in terms of SMART goal? And then finally, you want to be able to run the marathon in your writing process, depending on how long you've been given to write or what you're writing for. Often writing is not an end. It's something that we move from one topic to the other, or one subject to the other, or one literature to the other. So I see it as running a marathon, and to be able to run the marathon, we need to sustain. We're not running as an athlete that goes 100 meters. We're not sprinting. Writing is actually, for me, a marathon. And during this marathon, I did mention earlier, we do get that imposter syndrome. So we often feel like we're not good enough. We haven't reached that level yet. We feel, what if our supervisors find out that we're being an imposter? So it's quite real, but it's understanding that because you're a learner and you're in that space of academic writing to be able to learn and get critics and get reviews, that's a wonderful space to be, because you're open to learning, you're open to new knowledge, you're open to understanding and finding new things. And while you won't get it in the first instance, it's always good to start and write and get that imposter syndrome down, because the fact that you have chosen to write is an achievement in itself, is an achievement in doing what you believe in and going ahead with that. So give yourself credit for that, and make sure to know that you can achieve this, and you don't need to let the critic in your head get in between your work. So some of the tips you need to be able to look at is get to know yourself as the writer, who you are, what do you value, what is important to you, working out a time that is best for you, proofreading, explaining it yourself. So while you are the writer, you also want to be taking on the hat of the reader, who your audience are, why you're writing. Why is this writing so important to you? Is it just because you want to get publications, or is it because you want to make a difference? Reference the sources. One of the wonderful softwares that is available is called Menly. There's EndNote as well. So these are just tools that you want to have in your toolbox when you're writing. Referencing is one of them, because it saves you a lot of time as well when you go back and you want to reference. I like using Menly after I was recommended that by my supervisor, and I'll show you how that works. But it's a wonderful resource to have. Understand your values as well as a writer. What is it that you value about this topic? What is it that you value about this research? And if you're able to communicate the value of it, you are able to write better as well, because now you're recognizing your biases, but at the same time, valuing what is important. What happens after the paper has been submitted? Once it's submitted, do you forget about the topic, or do you add more to that conversation? What type of impact will it have on the community that you're writing, on the readers that will be writing? So having a sense of ownership that you're writing will have an impact, will have an influence, and we want to be able to make the right ones and understand copyright and patents. So before I end this, I'll just take you to Menly, if that's okay. So you know how this works. I'm just going to So Mendeley is a reference manager. And once you've had an account, you can put all of your collections or readings over here just by saying add new. If you have downloaded it onto your computer in files. And what it helps you do is, let's say I go into this reading. It gives you a reference to be able to put into your Word document as well as an in-text or as a bibliography. And when you go to the information, you can give annotations to your document. So let's say you were very interested in this paragraph, you have highlighted it, and you can talk about it like, oh, this is important, this is my reflection. And you can also have like a notebook of things that you found relevant, that you can connect back to that concept, for example. So these are just really nice ways of storing the literature that you've been reading, highlighting any important points. And what it then does, it takes you to Word, and it helps you to come back and reference the notes that you've had, any classifications that you had of the literature as well. So let me just go back. My library. So I've got my collections on research method, resilience theory, urban development, and I can keep adding as I go. But it also gives me a great input to the type of annotations that I've been doing in different files. And it makes it easy for referencing as well. So just a final tip as we end our session today. I hope that was useful, but I'm more than happy to take on any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed as a master degree student. I really learned a lot from you. And thanks all for joining this session. Hi, Letwin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, thank you everyone for following through the session. Thank you very much, Chethna. I don't know if we have any other questions for Chethna before we close. Any questions from the floor? I'll give this one a minute if anyone has a question. Let's see. Yes, everyone will get the recording. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. Okay, thank you. So yeah, in that case,
sorry, Letwin, can you remind them to fill the form to get the certificate?
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Noah posted the link for for certificate of participation. You can follow that and register your name there. So I don't want to add or subtract anything from what Chethna has said. So I'm not going to comment anything on there. I also need to take my time and meditate upon everything that I've learned today. So thank you so much, Chethna. Thank you so much. I think there are also a lot of people who are thanking you from the chat, if you can see that. Thank you for the informative session, and thank you everyone for joining our session. We hope to see you again in our next sessions. So if there are no other questions, please remember to post to register for the certificate of participation. and also follow us on our social media platforms. Thank you and do have a good night or good morning. Thank you so much, Chethna.
I just had a question, Letwin. I would like your feedback. If there was anything that was unclear, maybe I could improve on that later on, but your feedback would be very much appreciated. I'd like to get a feedback on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Maybe you can just create a form of a link also, then we share it with everyone who participated.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, all. Can we take a photo before we end the session?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Noah. If anyone is comfortable, please let's just share our videos. Let's see your smiley faces. Let's see where you're joining us from. Oh, thank you. Let's see your faces. Let's see your faces. I see you, Melvina, Cynthia, Eileen. Anyone else sharing your faces? Let's see those beautiful smiley faces. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Margaret. Oh, Safi, can you take the group photo?
Okay, sure. Please cheers. Show me your smile.
Yeah, Sheila, please smile.
One more time. And thank you all.
I'm just going to share this if it's okay. Sorry.
Yes, you can share.
Your feedback from today would be really appreciated. I would like to improve going ahead as well, but if there's any things that you found useful, that would also help me in the next time. So thank you all so much. And I'm excited to see all of your writing. All the best.
Thank you so much, Chethna. So everyone, before we leave, I would also appreciate if you also fill out the last question from the mentee for feedback for Chethna. Before you leave, please drop your response in the mentee. Thank you everyone for joining us from wherever you are. And goodbye. Please fill out the mentee, then leave. Thank you, Chethna.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chestnut.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Noah.